My name is Chris Hayes. Up on the slide there, we're not going to do a slide presentation at all. All we are going to do is talk to each other, have some good conversation, and I'm looking for support and engagement from those of you that are here. So that's how we roll. So our panel discussion is on upskilling your workforce. Keys to respecting employees and leveraging talent. So let me start with a question. How many of you are familiar with lean? A word called lean. Lean manufacturing, lean process improvement. Anybody not? Is that a brand new word to anybody? And I'm not talking dieting. So, okay, good. That's a great place to start. If you're familiar with it, a lot of what we're going to talk about is going to be very familiar. But what we want to do is really focus on the one principle of lean, which is respecting every single individual, whether that's your employees, whether that is your family, whether that is your suppliers or whatnot. And in today's mess that we have, many messes, anybody having challenges with workforce, trying to find people to work? Is that a pretty common problem, right? Most of the other panel discussions have been technical, economically driven. Ours is going to be a little bit different. We want to talk about the people skill. What do we do about our workforce? How do we manage? How are they managing the workforce shortages and upskilling the people they have inside of their organizations as part of a strategy to improve their businesses? So without further ado, I'm going to do a quick introduction of each of our panelists, and then we'll get started. So Michele Nash-Hoff. Michele is the founder and president of Electrofab Sales, a sales agency specializing in helping manufacturers select the right processes for their products, and she's been doing that since 1985. She is vice president of Industry Reimagine 2030. It's a new nonprofit whose mission is to change the narrative of American manufacturing from one of inevitable decline. I'm having a hard time with my words today. To vibrant opportunity. What a great thing. She's also the director on the board of American Jobs Alliance and the San Diego Inventors Forum. Michele is the author of Rebuild Manufacturing, The Key to American Prosperity, which is a sequel to the 2009 and 2012 edition of Can America Manufacturing Be Saved? I don't know, what do you guys think? Got to read the book to find out, right? Let's see here. She writes blogs. She writes a lot. She writes really wonderfully. She has earned her BA at San Diego State University and has a certificate of total quality management and a yellow belt in Lean Six Sigma. Next on our panel is Amy Altomare. I did screw it up. I knew I was going to. Amy has 16 years of experience in the service industry in roles ranging from project management, operations management, and process improvement. Currently, Amy is working with the City of Hope, which, by the way, was a previous award winner for the Lean and Excellent Supply Chain. So congratulations to City of Hope, doing wonderful things. She's a previous she is the program director for clinical quality strategy and optimization. Amy is also an instructor at the University of Southern California Center for Global Supply Chain Management, teaching here both green belt and black belt level Lean Six Sigma courses throughout her year. We good? Oh, you're turning you on. Throughout her career, Amy has focused on providing excellent customer service to clients' customers by producing innovative, team-driven solutions while developing staff and managers to grow and advance. Next on our panel is Celeste Heirs. Celeste is currently the Senior Manager, Operations, Learning and Development for E&J Gallo Winery in Modesto, right here in California. She is responsible for training and development of professionals in the operations and supply chain management roles, as well as creating career pathways for young adults in manufacturing. Prior to joining E&J Gallo, Celeste spent nearly 2 decades with Parker Hannifin, their engine and mobile original equipment division. And she managed the challenges of a dynamic global supply chain. Celeste is actively involved in local professional organizations such as ASCM and manufacturing councils. She's currently serving as the president and master certification instructor for ASCM. Next on our panel, but not least, we have missed him, Patrick on my paper. Patrick Grop.
Thank you.
I have a thing about names, making sure we say them correctly. Patrick began his career, training career at Sanyo, at the training center in Japan after graduating with really high honors at Drexel University. He earned his MBA from Boston University and promoted to the head of human resources for Sanyo, where he settled there. Patrick conducted TWI pilot projects in Syracuse, New York in 2001 and became the foundation for the Twi Institute, which has since trained a rapidly expanding global network of over 1,200 certified trainers who are now delivering TWI training in manufacturing, healthcare as well, construction, energy, and service industries in the US as well as around the world. He is the author of numerous books on TWI, and he is now the co-owner of the TWI Institute. With that, thank you, panelists. I appreciate that, you being here. Let's go ahead and get started on what they're here for. So let's start with Amy. Amy, what is upskilling? Tell our audience, and what's its value to employers?
So upskilling is providing the opportunity for employees to learn something new. They get the opportunity to expand from what their current role may be within the organization to really grow and expand into what maybe they're interested in. And I think for the employers, it is really getting something back from the people they're investing in. So what does an employee want? They want to feel engaged, they want to feel part of the organization, and they want to feel like somebody cares, is investing in them. So if they're coming in every day and they're not getting opportunities, they're not as engaged. There's some dissatisfaction happening. But with upskilling, you're providing these opportunities for them to learn something new, something that might be outside of what their norm is. And so you're going to increase their engagement, their satisfaction, which helps to increase retention. So you're not constantly having to go back out into the job market to find employees to come in. It also has shown to increase effectiveness, efficiency, and productivity, which helps your bottom line as an organization. So it's really saying, as an employer, I care about you, employee. Let me help you grow and mature in different areas of your role. And let's see if we can keep you internal to kind of grow with the organization. And that helps the employer be more stable, and it helps them to have that retention component.
Absolutely. Anybody have any comments?
Yeah, I just want to add to that because, a lot of my career was working with the Japanese. My mom was Japanese. That's how I got to Japan many decades ago when I was younger. But, the Japanese took a lot of those basic concepts, and a lot of it has to do with their culture. But they learned a lot, from the American experience after World War II. And, they really saw the company as something different than just our people are part of the process. In other words, you can say, oh, I'm going to throw all these resources, materials, equipment, labor, and we mix that all together and we have a business, right? But they saw it differently. In other words, the people are not just part of that mix. They're really part of managing the company. I heard a quote just last week. They were interviewing a Japanese executive, and he was running a plant that had, I think, 2,200 people. And I guess the question was, so how many lean managers and how many lean experts do you have in your company? And he thought about it for a second. He said, we have 2,200. In other words, that's how they see it. Each human being is part of the management of the company. And so they kind of view their people differently. And I think that's why they get different outcomes. Yeah,
and you mentioned, there's the Japanese culture, but business culture. One of the things that I hear from almost every company that I work with is help us change our culture. We want that. We want problem solvers. We want everybody inside of our organization, every person, every process, every day, right? And that helps for sure. Thank you both. Okay, let me pick on Patrick again, since you ended with that. How does upskilling connect with the lean principle of respect every individual?
Yeah, just picking up what I was just talking about, respect for each individual, comes from this Toyota house, or however you want to characterize that, and that's how the Japanese saw that. And one of the feedback or complaints, if you will, that we get, from the Japanese when they look at the American experience of what we're doing with lean and Toyota Production System and so on, is they say, yeah, you Americans, you studied all the tools and the lean tools and you got all that, but you missed the most important piece, which is the culture. We take that kind of for granted, or we kind of overlook it. But he said that's really at the core. So if you don't have that respect for people, then you're going to miss all the other things that go with it, or all the other things are not going to really engage, or they're not going to succeed. And that's been the experience, I think, of most American companies or Western companies. They've tried lean for many, many years now, and they're like, well, why aren't we like Toyota? We've been doing this for 10, 20 years. And so they're missing that big piece. And so how does upskilling, fit into that? Kind of like, Amy was saying, if you don't engage your people as human beings, then you're really not going to get the most value out of them. And I think that's what the Japanese were able to do very early on. So, when you look at human beings, they're not machines, they're people. They have dreams, they have goals, they have lives that they want to live and have fulfilling lives. And, if you're just a cog in the wheel when you go to work every day, then, I can't wait to get home, or I can't wait to find a better job that engages me in a way. And so, you really have to kind of look at, each individual. I remember when I first went to Japan, I was not in business, or I was actually a humanities major. I wanted to be a journalist. And I went to Japan because I was interested in learning Japanese. And I just remember my boss, he was really engaging with me. He really took the time to understand me as an individual, and he said, and I was teaching English, all the Japanese were going overseas. He says, we've got this thing called TWI, you're going to help translate their breakdown sheets, because we were taking them overseas and they were practicing things. Oh, by the way, you can go to the class. It's in Japanese, and you want to learn Japanese, right? And I was, I can go to the class? Yeah, go, learn. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And then, sometime later, then we started bringing people from the overseas facilities to Japan and said, well, we're doing that in English. Pat, can you help us out? Because now you studied it, you can teach the class. I'm like, me teach the class? Yeah, okay. I like to do that. Always engaging you and always trying to find, where's that spark? Even though we were promoting those things, and here I am 40 years later still teaching TWI. So if you engage your people really on that individualistic level, that I think the respect for people is really understanding, and I think that's the hard work of leadership. It takes a lot of work to understand each individual. But when you do, you get those results.
How many of you are leaders inside of organizations? How many of you are not? And how many don't want to tell me? Because there's some that didn't raise their hand. As leaders, I think a large portion of you are leaders in the room here. As leaders, how often do you go and talk to somebody and just ask them about themselves? How often do you purposefully have conversations to learn more about them, to engage them in something other than this is what you're supposed to do and this is what I expect? I'm a big fan of the neurosciences over the last 10 years or so, and the neurosciences tell us very specifically, people need to feel engaged. And we see this in the younger generation, that they don't want to just go to work and check their brains at the door. They want to be part of the solution. They want to feel like they're bigger. And so for those that are leaders in the room, practice that purposeful practice of respecting every individual in that way will go a long way. And for those of you that are not leaders, if you're not being asked those questions, offer the answers, offer the conversation with your leaders. Thank you very much, Pat. Any other comments?
Right.
Michele?
Well, one of the major principles of lean is empowering your employees. So the employee will be more empowered if they know more and they're not just doing one particular job. And it's also, where you're supposed to do cross training, especially for production level, shop floor kind of jobs, so that people are cross-trained, so that in a cell, they can learn how to do every function of that cell. And so then when you have, an employee that's absent for sickness or whatever, somebody else knows that skill. So keeps the continuous flow, which is the goal of lean, is continuous flow. So when people want to be able to learn on the job. where you can learn, have one skill and you can add an additional skill, and that's an important thing, is the growth of a person. So they have learned more, they can be more valuable to the company. The company will feel that they are an integral part of the company, because the company is really your people, process, and product or service. And if you're not upskilling your employees, you're not improving either your service or improving that product. So it's really an important, and it's also part of getting back to what is the goal of a company? Is the goal just to make profits, or is the goal to have a real organization that will continue? I like some of the comments of Bill Waddell in his book, The Heart of Manufacturing. So, you want people to be believe in your company, because every person in the company can essentially be a promoter or a salesperson of the company if they believe in the mission of the company. So the more skills a person has, the more they're able to want to have that company succeed and do everything that they can possibly do in their job function to make the company a success, because they're part of a family. And that's part of the culture of the company, is you become a family as you grow and learn and help each other in the company.
Great. Well, Michele, that was great information. I'm going to tag on to that if you wouldn't mind. Tell us a little bit more about what upskilling does as far as workplace culture. Pat mentioned culture. I mentioned it. It's the big thing, right? We need to change our culture. What does this upskilling do?
Well, the goal is to flatten the hierarchy in a lean company, a lean enterprise. So the more the person is empowered with skills, the more they feel that they're part of the whole culture of the company, that they've bought into the mission. They now have the skills to do their job the best that they can do. They have the opportunity for growth and then subsequent advancement in the company. So it really changes the whole culture of the company when you have employees that feel empowered. They know that they have the ability to learn new skills. They know that they have the ability to make decisions, because you want the decisions to be made at the lowest level for continuous improvement. So if they have those skills, they can be part of that continuous improvement process, which is really the goal of the whole company on the lean journey. Because lean is not just a method or tools, it's a journey of continuous improvement, a journey to continuously reduce all the different kinds of waste, to improve the quality, to improve the flow, to add capacity, to increase the profits of the company.
And that's true whether it's product or service, related to your earlier point. Great.
I would like to add on a little bit, because I agree with what Michele was saying. I think it also looks at, how did you feel when you were kind of coming through your company on your own journey? And did you have the opportunities to try something that was outside of your role? I reflect on that a lot. What was my path like? I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I felt like I was faking it till I made it most of the time, because I didn't have the opportunity to try something different to see if I would like that. And I think it goes into, with the culture piece and being a part of the mission and vision, is you're thinking about somebody who's coming after me is going to be in my role. How are they going to feel? And so as you upskill, you're giving people the opportunity to start to build the skills they need to be successful in their next path of their journey. And at City of Hope, we do a lot of mentoring. So we do a lot of interprofessional mentoring in a lot of different areas. And once a quarter, we come together and have a mentor mixer virtually. And we talk about really, what was your path to get where you're at? And how did you get there? And what does the next generation need? So I think it's really thinking about the big picture of the organization and each individual with that respect of how they're going to continue on that journey.
So, Celeste, we haven't forgotten you.
I know. I'm still here. It's all good.
Celeste does a lot of training in her organization. What are some effective ways to bring some of the knowledge and the skills to the employees?
So just for context, my organization as a winery is the largest family-owned winery in the world. On an average day, we package and get ready to ship 300,000 cases of wine. That's a lot for any context. So very robust continuous flow environment in which we have batch production environments in our cellar. And even though we are vertically integrated, we still have our own supply chain challenges. And so when we look at skilling our workforce, and my scope of responsibility is our spirits plant, which does the harder alcohol, but we also have the cellar and the main bottling room. We're looking at 2,000 employees with different needs as far as their skill development. And we look at our shop floor team members, we go where they work to train. And you can't train someone in a vacuum. We have a beautiful training center we spent millions of dollars on, with lots of automation equipment that we get to practice some skill. But when it comes where the rubber meets the road, we go where they are. And we ask the employee at all levels in the organizations, how do you want to learn? And that very question lends to respect. Say, how do you want to learn? So we may have a team member that doesn't want to be in the classroom. They want to learn hands-on, they're kinesthetic. Wonderful. Let's adapt our training style to that. Well, in 2020, and guys, I can talk for days on this, but in 2020, alcohol consumption went up significantly.
Tell them how much.
Which
We talked about this. This
we
is
did talk
crazy.
about this. You testified
You'll
to
take
that
some
one.
ownership. How many
So-
want to take some ownership?
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for keeping our
How much,
company
Celeste?
growing. So
Crazy.
after the shutdown, we would say in the fourth week of March of 2020, wine sales went up by 45%
5%.
for our company alone.
Would you have
okay.
guessed that?
45%. And shifting the demand from on-premise, which is your restaurants and bars, to your retail. Our company makes Barefoot. We make Apothic and a few of other wines, Barefoot being the #1 wine in the world. And we had to go about changing how we did things and how do we train people. And this man to my left here is very integral in that. And that kind of dips into our next question as well. But we had to change how we trained. We were forced to reevaluate how we produced. And our spirits plant, thanks to a little product called Pink Whitney, went 24/7 in June of 2020. Our winery went, we do have a 24/7 operations, but all lines were 24/7. We had to not only hire roughly 250 people, but we also needed to train them while standing 6 feet apart, distance, tracking them, the whole nine, to be able to train them well so they are not injured on the job. So we reached out to TWI and we said, how do you do this? And the job instruction method is what we started transforming our way of doing things. Our previous way was, you're an operator, you're a newbie, you guys stand together, you figure it out. It's called MSU. I won't tell you what the S is, but it's making stuff up. And that did not lend to good cycle times on our training. So we went to a more concerted effort. And that was a very targeted, very professional approach to how we train. In our supply chain professional realm, these are planners, schedulers, and harvest managers. We deploy the ASM method of 2 APIC certifications, certified supply chain professional and certified in production inventory management, both of which I teach. But we started going to where are the gaps in your understanding of the supply chain and applying that knowledge there. Again, offering classes via Zoom, via in person, one-on-one, did a lot of coaching and mentoring and building that network as well. So go to where the people are. Sounds like Gemba, because it is. Go to where the people are, go and see, and then adapt, not the other way around.
Celeste, since you mentioned Pat was integral in the developing of your employees, Pat, any 2 things. Please describe what TWI is and the TWI Institute real fast. And then if you wouldn't mind, tag on to what Celeste was telling us, how you helped.
Well, in a nutshell, and again, Celeste and I could talk to you for hours and days about TWI, but on a high level, I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, I learned TWI in Japan. but it's not Japanese. TWI was a methodology. It was developed during World War II, right here in the United States, to help win the war. Because, as you know from history, we provided all the material, airplanes, ships, guns, but all the men who were who were in the factories, they all went off to fight the war. And they were replaced by many women. Rosie the Riveter, very famously, went into the factory, and the US government realized, we would need a new methodology because the way we trained, the way we treated respect for people, the way we treated the men would not work with Rosie. And if Rosie left and went home, we'd all be speaking German and Japanese today. We would have lost the war. And so without going into the details, so this was the genesis, and they came up with a program. They brought the best minds together from all across the country because it was the war. They could literally draft them into the TWI service. And they developed training programs that dealt with not just job instruction, but with leadership, also job methods improvement, which later became called Kaizen. Again, Kaizen was not developed by the Japanese. We gave that to them after the war. And so there's a lot of history there, and you can look it up. And but these are just basic, am I right? So that's just common sense.
Very basic.
But as they say, common sense is not common practice, right? Just very basic common sense ways, but there's a lot of skill involved. And so, but I think our message to all of you is that, these are just principles that have been around. They're not Japanese. They come right here from the USA, and they can be learned. And we saw the effects at companies like Gallo, where they were literally able to meet the challenge. It wasn't a war, but kind of like a war.
It was a war. I would tell people all the time, we're at a war. The war is Corona, it's COVID, it's our own will, but we're at war. And we're going to fight this, we're going to do it differently. So it took executive leadership support and a blank check somewhat to make that happen. But truly, you had to think differently. It was a disruptor, for sure.
Great, thank you both. Michele, back to you. What are some outside sources that companies can use to upskill their employees? Obviously, folks like Twi Institute, but what else do we have out there that they might not know about?
Well, we have a lot more than people know about. I come from the world of manufacturing. Right now, current estimates are there's 500,000 unfilled manufacturing jobs because we don't have the people with the right skills to fill the job. If we don't change that, it's going to escalate to 2 million by 2030. Well, for the last several years, I've been researching and writing about that and visiting places. And one of the oldest organizations that's been upskilling employees is Tooling U, owned by Society of Manufacturing Engineers. It's actually been around since 1979. It has developed a curriculum that's used by 1 out of 5 community colleges in the country that are teaching manufacturing skills at the community college level. It's being used by many of the top, Fortune 500 companies.
We use them. Great
And
program.
it's a great curriculum. But there's also other sources like the American Welding Association. They teach welding and you can get welding certifications. The National Tooling and Machining Association has training centers. There's one right here in Los Angeles and Santa Fe Springs where that you can get, training in machining skills. We also have training organizations that are springing up privately, places called maker spaces. And the largest maker space in the country is actually in Irvine, and it's called the Urban Workshop. And they have classes and teaching how to use the manufacturing equipment that this maker space has. We have one in San Diego called the Makery. And also like in the woodworking industry, we have a woodworking sort of maker space in San Diego, which is one of the largest in the country. Had no idea that San Diego was such a center for making products out of wood. We also have, maker spaces and workshops all over the country that are starting up to teach. But then the community colleges all over the country have started to reinstitute career technical training, where you can get short-term training in 6 to 9 months to get certificates in specific skills used by manufacturers. And one of the things that people don't realize that Governor Schwarzenegger did was to reinstitute a career technical training in California. It actually didn't get, it passed before he ended his term of office, but it really didn't get set up until after he was out of office, because it took time for the colleges, the high schools, to set up the classes again, to get the equipment, to set up the class space to have those. But we have 3 high schools in San Diego that are teaching specific skills in manufacturing. One is the San Pasquale Academy near the Wild Animal Safari Park, private charter school. These are also designated as prime schools by SME. There's prime schools designated by SME all over the country. And we have 4 community colleges in San Diego that teach specific manufacturing skills. The city of San Diego City College has been teaching machining skills for 100 years. It started with the shipbuilding industry that started in the early 1900s, but they're still, they were the only school teaching manufacturing skills during, when everybody else stopped. They never stopped. 100 years of teaching machining skills. They also have a continuing education NASCO immediately as soon as they graduate. We have a training center in North County that's also teaching manufacturing skills, Mira Costa College. We have Miramar College in center city of San Diego, Mira Mesa area, that is teaching skills for the biotech and biomedical industry. So those kinds of programs are going on. I visited training programs in Charleston, South Carolina, Greensboro, North Carolina, North Dakota, San Marcos, Texas, as part of writing my articles when I'm a columnist for Industry Week. So and a lot of other companies are starting apprenticeship programs. So you have the training that they're getting at a community college or even a high school, and then you have the apprenticeships program that the companies are sponsoring. Some of them are state funded, like South Carolina. Any company that moves into South Carolina that's going to hire more than 10 people gets their people trained for free. In California, we have the California Employment Training Panel, and companies can get funding to help pay for the cost of training for their employees, and they can handle either directly or they can go under the master contract that the California MEP, Manufacturing Extension Partnership, which is a federal program. Every state has a center, and the California one is California Manufacturing Technology Consulting, which is headquartered in Gardena. And so you can get training, whether it's lean training or training in manufacturing skills, or it's all kinds of different kinds of training that you can get and not pay full price, because it's getting subsidized with the Employment Training Panel monies. So that's just an example. I mean, I could talk for hours because I've written dozens of articles on this subject. So this
We'll
is
let you all
something.
come up to Michele
Right, I could give a
after.
whole, I actually give a whole hour presentation on this.
Anybody want to stay for dinner? Any other comments?
So she mentioned apprenticeship programs, and that's one thing that Gallo has invested in. We have both state and federally registered apprenticeship programs for our mechanics, which obviously we saw through our strategic workforce planning initiatives. We do follow that process, which is through the Human Capital Institute, that says we need to go look at the skills of the future. Where are we going to have gaps? Where is our dynamics and our demographics? Where are we shifting? And mechanics and machine operators were a big portion of that. So those 2 apprenticeship programs are under my guys. I guess I watch them. I'm the dean of the School of Apprentices, essentially. And we send them in partnership with Modesto Junior College through the career technical side for our mechanics For our operators, we do our training internally with a majority of their training on the job. Their relevant supplemental instruction, which is a requirement of all state and federally ran apprenticeship programs, is done in-house, which we supplement with ASCM foundations, as well as we bring people this big piece of purpose. We have all of our apprentices go through Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We want them to drive their purpose into work and bring and align with our organization's mission of serving joy in everything we do. So apprenticeship programs, yes. Technical colleges, yes. We go one step further and we go to the high school level. In addition to apprentices, I manage a high school pathway program, which we partner with the 7 high schools in Modesto and 5 surrounding school districts. And last year we had 194 high school seniors go through our 10-week program, prepping them for the world of work, which they can then apply for internship programs and fast track them into manufacturing roles. In the last 10 years, we have had over 100 students join our workforce with a tenure. They stay with us for more than a year, so that we've seen them grow into high levels of management, which it could be in supply chain planning, and we have 1 team leader in our warehouse. We have those kind of retention. But what it takes is engaging at that high school level, at the career technical level. You mentioned where that shift is. We are super fortunate in a nearby city. We have a high school that has a manufacturing academy, and I get to go teach with them and in partner with those educators, changing their curriculum to use the words we use in industry. So it's access to students and talent. Gallo is the preferred employer of choice in our area. We do have that going for us, but we make it that way because we engage in the community. Again, we go to where the people are. So along those lines. So having something of a career pathing decision is a lot of that.
Great. And I've just got to put a little bit of a plug. Michele, you mentioned the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. The organization that I work for is the nonprofit with the Manufacturing Extension Partnership in Utah. And most of the Manufacturing Extension Partnerships can help you if you are interested in that, in creating apprenticeship programs like Celeste has in Gallo, like Michelle's seen in a lot of companies. So there are, again, lots of resources. We probably really could stay for 8 hours and just tell you all of the best kept secrets that nobody knows about out there.
Right.
So wonderful. Thank you both. Let's go to our next question, which is kind of the antipathy of what we've been talking about. Let's talk challenges. How do we promote upskilling in employees? Pat, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. The most common thing that you hear, of course, is we don't have time to train, you know. And,
Anybody feel that?
and, you know, which is kind of a funny question, because if, you know, it's kind of like, you know, how do you teach a person who's drowning how to swim, you know, because the reason we don't have time is because we're underwater, right? And yet we just keep throwing warm bodies at the process and hoping that something magic will happen. And that is something I think that, you know, and it's more than just a question of time. I think it really is it has everything to do with management outlook and management support. You know, when management just wants to get that product out the door, the message they're giving to their frontline leaders is whatever you have to do, you know, just get it out the door, you know, just make it happen. And so when you have people like Celeste and her team saying, hey, these people are, you know, the reason why we don't have time is because we're breaking things, we're doing defects, we're damaging the equipment, you know, and so there's your, you know, your cart and horse problem, right? Your chicken and egg problem. You know, you don't have time because we're not doing things right. And so the key, I think, to that is at some point, you know, but the train is going down the tracks, you know, and so we can't stop the train. And I think the answer there, and that's something that, you know, we look at very carefully, is really picking and choosing, you know, where you train. Those strategic jobs, you know, I like to say when I'm in a class, boy, if you could just do one thing in your factory tomorrow, if you could do one thing right, what would that be? And we had that question, you know, when we started doing TWI in healthcare, and the answer was washing your hands, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
And so, you know, we said, boy, there's you know, all the kinds of work that's going on every day, but boy, if people would just learn to wash their hands properly, that would make all the difference. But it was a heavy lift. We taught it was up in, our first out was up at Virginia Mason up in Seattle, which was very famous, for lean and all those things. And they were already 10 years, 15 years into lean, but they still didn't know how to wash their hands. And so we trained several hundred people, how to wash their hands one-on-one, and that made all the difference. And then once you were done with that, then all the problems that you had because people weren't washing their hands, then those problems went away or got under control, which opened up time. Then, because you're not dealing with those problems, so now we can move to the next thing. What was the next thing? And that had to do with scrubbing the hub, cleaning, dressing changes, infection control, blood culture contaminations, just one at a time. Take things one at a time, because at each step, when you clear that problem out, then that opens up more time, because now I'm not dealing with all those problems that I had because we were doing those things wrong. You just take it step by step, and then the next thing you know, you're well down the road. I'm sure Celeste has a lot to say about this because she dealt with it a lot.
I deal with this every day, the challenges of it all. I have a training department and a whole training team. And when I was thrust into this role that I'm in now, it was a change for the organization. They had training managers reporting to ops managers. What are you going to sacrifice first, production or training? Training, 100% of the time. So the vice president of Modesto operations said, okay, this isn't working. We're going to make one role to manage all of these training functions. We're going to roll it under HR, where the people are. And so I technically report into HR. I like to call myself fake HR. It's a lot more fun. And I report a dotted line to the vice president of operations. So now there's a checks and balances. So oftentimes I find myself, in fact, I answered one of these emails this morning. The director of bottling will say to me, hey, why do we have so many people in training? Well, because, I don't know, we're going to do a big project launch and we need to do this. And instead of going from the emotional space, I speak his language because I'm an ops person. I'm a supply chain person. I said, well, if you don't train them now, this is not going to be the capacity you're going to gain here in 3 weeks. And then 6 months from now, you're not going to be able to deliver. So do you want to pay it now or do you want to pay it later? Usually I win. But there are times when my trainees get pulled. We track how long it takes for a trainee from start to finish a machine skill or whatever skill it is. So anytime they get pulled, it hits their metric. And we say, listen, every time the business makes a decision to derail this training, you are delaying this. And this is translated how many dollars in training hours you have now added to your budget. Thank you. So I speak to the finance guys. I speak to the leaders. My whole job is to keep management off the shop floor when it comes to training. So my trainers can do whatever they need to do. When it comes to the office ranks, the salaried ranks, and they say, we don't have time to train. And I have a very candid conversation with those managers. I said, you do have time. I want to hear you say, I choose not to train, because that's really the choice. That is really your choice. It isn't, I don't have time. No, I choose not to make time. How many hours do you spend on your phone? My iPhone will tell me 4 hours a day is on average the time I spend here. Now, what can you learn in 10 minutes? We can do micro learning. We can do this. Tell me what your need is. We will meet that need. But don't tell me you don't have time, because that's a choice. And so by having those tough conversations and having a little bit of managerial courage, Pat knows my nickname at the office is the honey badger, because truly it is that. If you do not make time for this, I'm going to be in your face. And because I care about our company's future, and the people pipeline is just as important as that material pipeline. And we learned that during the pandemic. So the people supply chain is something that you have to fight for, just as much as you do with your metals and your grapes and bottles.
And if I can say so, this takes us right back to our first question about respect for people, right?
Yeah, right.
If you're not respecting your employees to give them the proper training, and then we send them out there to the floor, they try their best, they struggle, they fail, and then they get blamed for that. I'm looking for another job, so it's as simple as that. And so fighting those battles, because it is a battle. So you have people like Celeste that go out and fight those battles. And how does that look then to the people in your workforce that are saying, oh, they're going to battle for me so that I get the proper training so that I can succeed in my job. And that's the key.
And it sets a precedence, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, it
when
does.
your top leadership is pulling training, your next level of future leaders that come up, what are they going to do? They're going to do exactly the same thing. And so you're in this vicious cycle of never really developing the people to keep them at your organization. It's hard work.
Yeah.
We've all done it. It's hard work to keep the commitments, but it's chicken or the egg, stop and sharpen your saw, or it's going to break, right? Thank you so much. Next question. We know that we need to train people. I think we're all in agreement on that, right? How do you know how to identify what those future skills are going to be so you can get ahead of that curve? Amy, you want to take this one?
Sure, and I want to look at it in kind of two different perspectives. One, you have to know what's going on in your industry and field to be able to prepare your workforce and the future people in those roles for those skills. So you have to really be out there and know, what's this new technology? What is the new change? What's the best practice? And then you have to say, okay, where does my organization sit in that? And what are our goals and strategies? And we align that and we make sure that that trickles down. But then you also have to think about the individual. So we do a lot of learning needs assessments, and we look at different criteria that's out in different professional organizations, and we craft learning needs assessments so people can self-assess and assess their peers, their direct reports, and say, okay, here are our gaps, and here's how we're going to build that training program. But at the same time, you have to have those conversations. You have to talk with people and find out, what do they also want to do? So for me, it's not just what are the new things happening in the field or the industry, but it's what do the people also want and need for them to grow? And I think that that's kind of a delicate balance, because you don't want it just to always be top down. Sometimes you have to let it come from the bottom and have them tell you. When I have conversations with folks out on the unit floor in the hospital and the clinic, if somebody says, man, I'm curious about this, or I'm wondering about this different practice, well, we find them a mentor and we help them work through an evidence-based or continuous improvement project to take ownership of that. They didn't know how to do that process improvement, but they were curious and they had wonder. So we combine the skills to give them a way to try that out. And I think that's where it all starts to come together, so that people are feeling like, wow, I'm learning this new thing, I'm helping the organization, and I want to keep doing that.
Okay, thank you. Michele, you have anything to add?
Well, yes, it's the world of manufacturing is changing rapidly. Technology's been changing very rapidly in the last 10 years. Additive manufacturing is one of the new technologies, but there's nobody training anybody how to use the equipment. So there's new technologies, new equipment that's coming into for the more automation, the cobots that work with people. And so those are some of the things you have to think about. Okay, what are we going to be automating in the future? Are we going to be doing a very, in reality, California is a state of small businesses. 90% of California manufacturers are under 100 people. So they aren't the kinds of companies that are going to afford to automate their whole production line. But you can automate a particular process. So you need to look at your processes and see where you can automate a specific process, like cutting wires are going to be inserted into a plastic injection molded part that's going to be one of those parts that you put on the roof to scare off birds off your roof. Those are different kinds of things. So you have to think of what kinds of processes, what kinds of equipment I'm going to use in the future for my next product. So that is something that is really difficult for manufacturers to be able to look at and see, what is the productions. And that's actually one of the things that my new nonprofit Industry Reimagine is. We're trying to start industry dialogues with executives to have them imagine what their company is going to be like 8 years from now, and get started visioning and what possibilities there could be for the future. Because right now everybody's so busy with the present, we haven't got time to think about what it's going to be like in the future.
And just tying right back to what you said, Amy, it's understanding what the strategy of your organization is. If you're not doing strategy work, it's going to be hard for you to align. Well, it's going to be hard for you to imagine, number one, and then second, to align what you want to train on, what we do need to upskill to the strategies of the organization. So perfect. We have one more question left, and that should give us, if we go pretty good, about 5 minutes left for some questions. So Celeste, how can an employer implement a good training upskill program? Broad.
That's a
just
big
solve
topic
that,
right
would ya?
there. Yeah, I got it all sorted. No, I don't. But I can tell you this, you start small. Implement small, pilot. I love that in the TWI method. We go and we do a pilot. We prove it to ourselves. Does this work? Then you go to the next layer and you try it again. We call it we are on our job instruction or JI journey. And we're we have a 3-year roadmap. My job is to ensure we have training programs that are solvent, meaning that they start with intention and they have delivery in that ROI side. So a lot of that determining training ROI, fun stuff. That's how we define if it's going well or not, but always start small and then grow from there. I would say start where your roles that are
I 100% agree. And I think that I'm kind of learning as I go with some of these. I do a lot of leadership development, kind of small team setting. And I think another thing is you have to be willing to change direction when you realize that the folks that you're training need something different. So myself with our ACNO, our Assistant Chief Nursing Officer, and our Chief Executive in Education and Professional Development, and I embarked on a manager development program, and we thought we need to get them to the highest level of problem-solving, evidence-based practice that we can. But then we realized after having one of our first sessions that they needed some more basic, like, how do I get through daily operations? How do I deal with different components? And so we said, you know what? We need to readjust, refocus, and go again. And it worked out so well that we had people who joined our organization after we had started emailing us saying, when can we join? We can't wait to do this training. And we check in after each session and we find out, it's called clear, cloudy, and checkout. They tell us something that they're clear on, something that they're cloudy on, and then they check out for our wellness hour. But during those cloudies, we use those to build our future trainings. Even if it's just adding a little something in to make it clearer for them next time, we're always trying to take our content, make sure we're focused on it, and add something else in to support the people doing the work.
Well, and I have to just commend you on it, because nobody wants to create something and call your baby ugly, right? But that's exactly what you're doing, and not many people are willing to do it. So wonderful. Well, that is the end of our questions for today. We've got about 6 minutes left for questions from you to the panelists. You have to come up with at least one or we are locking the doors. Thank you.
So I manage truck drivers, which presents challenges when it comes to Okay, so I manage truck drivers, which presents challenges when it comes to training opportunities for them, because there's only so many things you can train a truck driver to do outside of their normal day-to-day jobs. And I'm sure there's a lot more positions like that. With mechanics, it's fairly simple. You just get them wrench time behind a different piece of equipment. and they definitely appreciate that sort of stuff. But what would you do, or what would you suggest for something like, or a position like a truck driver, where you can only train them how to drive so many times, or how to use a different onboard computing system?
Anybody want to take that
I
one?
would- when
Any
it-
truck drivers in your past life?
Yes, actually. But what I would do is look at what skills specifically you're trying to train. If it's hands-on and it can be separate from the cab of the truck, okay. But ask them, where do you want to learn? How do you want to learn? I've seen, we have a local high school, Patterson High School, actually trains high school students how to become truck drivers. So we are a big logistics hub out there, so it works. And what they do is a lot of simulation work. So they have a truck simulator, kind of like a forklift simulator, but it's VR, and they get to play with that and learn some basic functions and be able to learn new roads, not new roads, but new laws and regulations in an interactive way. So it is not just the read your manual or classroom lecture. So just engaging them in a different space, also scheduling in training time. So I know we want to get truckers out on the road, but making sure we have a dedicated downtime for training so they aren't feeling that pressure that I have somewhere to be in 10 minutes, hurry up, show me this, let me go. But think about how you're engaging them on that hands-on level. I would obviously advocate job instruction breakdown, quick method that is standard and deliver exact same way every single time. Incorporating then how that works in your space. But ask them first.
VR's coming. I
It's
know
here.
Tooling U we're working on some VR stuff. It's the wave of the future for training, so wonderful. Other questions? Go ahead, pass that. I'll come back to you. Oh, you've got a mic, sorry. Okay,
In my back pocket. I'm Pete Darragon.
I don't think it's on. But we'll just trade. Yes, we have a job breakdown
Test,
sheet for
okay.
that.
My name is Pete Darragon. My colleague Bill and I run Stanton Chase Los Angeles, which is a global firm, but we've kind of got two layers of culture. We're a global firm. We've got 400 people worldwide, roughly, and we run an office of 10 or fewer people in Southern California. We found it impossible to recruit executive search consultants in order to grow our team. And when we do find somebody that is interested, they usually want 2 times as much guaranteed compensation as we have the resources to pay. So I'm planning on having my own workforce development program and doing a mentorship. So taking junior people that might have just gotten an MBA, or they're deep into a technical profession and would like to maybe recruit for that profession, or we could steal somebody out of a company that is like an internal talent acquisition. But to the panel, just any guidance, cautions, structures that could be followed to do that sort of thing. I mean, the thing that I'm most fearful about is my bandwidth, which is already limited. But I'd like to. I think if I was younger, having the leader of a firm mentor and train me would be a very exciting proposal. So I'll just throw that out there.
Lauren, who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I can just, I think, one of the keys, especially, with what you're doing is, when you bring up those younger people, then how do you keep them? And so that getting, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Because, going back to our theme of respect for people and building relationships, with that person so that, they really are dedicated, to the work that you're doing for them. And so that's one thing. And then, your bandwidth is limited. And so having that, what we've been talking about here, that instruction skill, so that you can quickly train people to do some of the basic things. That way they can get to work right away. We compare that to, what some people call job shadowing. I remember some people say, oh, we're going to do 12 weeks of job shadowing, like 12 weeks. We need this thing out like next week. In other words, you need a methodology where you can break things down into their component parts and really have great skill in training, basic skills. And so skills in getting, skills in training so that you can speed up that training process. with the TWA methodology that we've been talking about, we see like 75% reduction in time it takes to get people up and running on skills. And so methodology, I think, is really critical, but also relationships. You'd hate to train someone like that, and then, like you said, you're training your competition. And
But you mentioned something, the mentorship piece. It's not only you. You have others. You have at least one more person in your organization. I would say build those layers of mentorship. Kind of what Amy was talking about is you build those layers of mentorship so the burden doesn't completely fall on you. Rotate them through. But I understand that fear. I'm training the individual that's going to leave. I've seen in our own talent acquisition department, which I do not manage, but I see it because I'm dealing with it on the other end, a churn of about 30 to 40%. That is a hot space. Recruiting space is hard right now. But your logic of going to a technical person, maybe in supply chain, that may be interested in their own personal development, maybe even look like gig work or part-time work where they can dabble in your space and do their day job. That may be some way to have a flex type of workforce.
And I will say that's how I got to where I am. I used to be a city planner, so I project managed city developments, and I shadowed and would take PTO and go work for actually Professor Nick Baez, and I fell in love with process improvement in healthcare. And so about 12 years ago, I said, okay, I'm not doing city planning anymore. I'm shifting, but I would spend a day shadowing him at Kaizen events.
Awesome, Michele. We are out of time, guys. I recognize you had a question. There were a couple of other questions that we wanted to ask. In the interest of time, let's end now, but please come up and talk to our panelists. We can stay for a few more minutes. I appreciate you all hanging out with us after everybody else has gone home. Thank you again. I hope you enjoyed the summit. This is one of my favorite things to do every year, so.